I don't do it just to win, but I have to win. And we're going to be the best at what we do. But I want to see all those around me win and succeed. I just love seeing others change their lives and put themselves in a position to win. That's harmony to me.
That voice is Marc Spindler, former NFL defensive tackle for the Detroit Lions and New York Jets, a man built for battle in the trenches. Marc lived a dream only a tiny percent of athletes ever experience. But when the whistle blew for the final time, he faced a question every warrior eventually asks. Who am I when the fight is over? This is Harmony Talk, the podcast where dreamers and doers share the human stories behind achievement and impact. Each conversation is made possible by AM Skyer, the sponsor of Harmony Talk, and a partner to people and organizations who make communities stronger. I'm your host, Greg Frigoletto. Today we explore the journey from roaring stadiums to the silence of retirement, from a life driven by aggression and purpose to a second act built on reinvention and identity. Marc shows us why your legacy is never finished and why the next chapter can matter even more than the first. Marc, welcome to Harmony Talk.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Truly, the pleasure is ours. And Marc, as I mentioned in the opening, you had a successful NFL career, 9 years, in fact, which far surpasses the NFL average, which I think is under 4 years. And for a podcast that focuses on dreamers and doers, I don't think anyone would argue that your NFL career in and of itself is the definition of being a doer. But today we're going to spend time focusing on what came after the NFL. Okay?
I'm good with that. God gave me a great talent, and he also gave me what it took to use that talent. And all the things that I learned from my high school days all the way through my NFL days are really what transformed me, not only from the personal aspect of it, but from the professional aspect where I am today. So I owe a lot to the game of football. I owe a lot to a lot of people, but I'm happy where I'm at today and excited about what we have going on today.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to focus on. So if you could, we're going to start right at the end of your NFL career. Take us to that final day as an NFL player, the last time as an NFL player. In that silence, were you filled with relief, or did you feel a profound sense of loss for the identity you knew you would be leaving behind?
Well, interesting enough, I didn't know it was going to be my last game. And that's today, I think deep inside probably still bothers me. When that whistle blew for the last time, I had surgery in the off season. I had every expectation. I got myself in shape. I thought I'd be able to come back bigger, faster, and stronger. Coming back for my 10th year, I was under contract, but unfortunately it didn't work out. And so I decided that I was going to sit out that year and then come back even better the following year. And sitting out probably wasn't the best choice. Become the following year, I really didn't have an opportunity to get back into the league. It's something that still haunts me to this day. So it was really bittersweet coming to that realization that really my final game was played nearly a year and a half prior to when I actually announced my retirement from the National Football League. So I didn't really get to experience that emotion per se, like I think a lot of people would. They say, this is my last time I'm going to play. This is going to be the last game. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to soak it in. I didn't really get that. And so to this day, it still bothers me a little bit, even being post 30 some years from the last time I actually donned the Honolulu silver and blue.
So as you were going into that year where you expected to maybe train and, like you said, get bigger, faster, stronger, you fully anticipated that you would play at the end of that year. And what was the reason why that didn't happen?
Well, I was completely in great shape. I just never really got that phone call, got that opportunity to be able to go back out and showcase what I had the ability to be able to do and how the NFL had changed when it came to minimum salaries and what, a veteran like myself from the minimum aspect, which is, a positive and a negative, had to make. I think NFL's teams looked at it like, look, we can go out and we can sign some rookie individuals. We can get 3 for the price of 1, and clearly with upside potential. And so that really ended up being my demise. And again, it's something that probably deep and down inside still haunts me. But really, Greg, at the end of the day, even if I did have that opportunity to say this was my last game, I wasn't going to play again. The competitive nature that I was born and bred with and became, so important to me, I still sit there and say, they'd have to rip the jersey off my back. And so it didn't matter if I went out the way I wanted to go out or the way I did go out. Going out is just not an easy pill to swallow when you're a fierce competitor as I was and raised the way that I was. So either way, it wasn't going to be good.
So when you talk about it wasn't going to be good and it wasn't going to be easy, what was going to be difficult? Or instead of what actually turned out to be difficult for you? Was it losing the identity of being an NFL player? The structured daily purpose of being an NFL player? What was hard specifically?
What really became hard was the fact of losing the locker room, losing the camaraderie, losing the thrill of victory, and then suffering through the agony of defeat. When you're a competitor, you want to compete. And having an outlet to be able to go in and release all these tensions, all these stressors on your opponent is something that it's just hard to explain. But, walking out from that tunnel and hearing 80,000 people cheer, it's just very hard to duplicate. And losing all of that, it's hard to get over. It just really is because it's hard to duplicate.
So I know, you have a history. You had already mentioned, you grew up in a household and in a community where, that mean streak as an NFL player really started to be born. When you ended your NFL career, you go from that mean streak, from that aggression, from walking out of that tunnel, the adrenaline that's pumping with it. How do you move on or transition to what's next and not feel as though the loss of those things is going to maybe impact you negatively moving forward?
I feel then as I feel now, you have to test yourself every single day. And so after I realized that year and a half period of time, that year period of time from when it ended to when I retired, I felt that, I'm going to try to get back up on the horse right away. I looked at it like it was a loss. Like I didn't get a chance to go back and compete. So physically, mentally, psychologically, it was hard to overcome. But I knew I had to get back into something. And so I got into the radio and television business right away. And just found a new avenue to compete and to try to be good and to be the best I could be and do everything that was necessary to be done. And so I did that for quite some time. It helps you bridge the gap to overcome it in a certain way. But then as time passes, you do lose some of that identity. You do lose some of that. And I think the people who go on to have post success from anything competitive like that, whether it's football or sports or any competition, the ones who move on the quickest and get over it the quickest are the ones that actually live a more healthier lifestyle in the future. And so thankfully, I was able to get in that radio and television business. I found myself another avenue to compete in. And then when I felt that wasn't going, after 7 years to the level I wanted to take it to, then I had to find another avenue. And look, at the end of the day, it's like there's that famous boxing movie, Cinderella Man. I knew at that point in time, I was still competing for milk, right? I still had to put bread on the table. I still had to provide for my family. And so how my father and my mother had raised me to go out and compete every single day, now I had to compete for my own children and I had to compete for my wife. And so, I had NFL money. It was put away. It was invested, but I knew that wasn't going to be the be all end all. So you got to get back up on that horse, Greg, and you got to go find your next adventure, your next challenge. And fortunately, I was able to do that.
Before we move away from that NFL part of your life, you probably had a tremendous amount of camaraderie, right? Whether you were playing, I think, at Pitt, your college career, you move into the NFL, it's a brotherhood, So when that ended and you had that year off and you were starting to get into that transition, did the loss of that immediate gratification from that brotherhood need to be replaced? And was it replaced immediately? Did you find a way to have that itch scratched with that sort of brotherhood?
I believe in one sense, you can't replace that. You just can't. When you're in that locker room and that locker room mentality, a band of brothers every single day, preparing the way that you prepare and have that trust and that love for one another, it's just very hard to duplicate that. Fortunately enough for me, I was blessed with 3 young children and an amazing wife. Now we're married for over 30 years. That became my brotherhood. That became my be all end all. Outside of that, friends, unfortunately, they come and go. Relationships come and go, but your family is always still your family. So my brotherhood became my family.
So that's great. And they helped guide you. And as you transitioned from the NFL, you mentioned you got into TV and broadcasting and with the unwavering drive, that you have that pushes you and other athletes into whatever's next. How did you consciously redirect that intensity and that competitive energy into that post-football career or your role as a father, as you just mentioned? I've often thought that when transitions happen or when somebody moves in a new direction, I always like to say, that you have to do it with intention. Was there a point where you actually had that realization of, I really have to do this with intention? There's a part of me that I have to be able to, move forward in a way with intention and know that it's not just going to fall out of the sky into your lap.
I believe there's a certain form of that, but the reality is I had intention every single day of the week, month, quarter, year for 9 years in the NFL. And so every day I woke up, I knew someone was, coming to take my job. And so that transition to moving with more and further intention only deepened understanding now I had to go out. I'm not being disrespectful, but find a real job, something outside of what I was programmed to do for my entire life, which was eat, sleep, and breathe football and the training around it. But understanding I was going to take those same exact characteristics. I mean, this is all I knew. And really, it must have been subconsciously because I don't think it was consciously. I didn't say, hey, what I'm going to do is just take the same skill set, the same work ethic with me into the next job opportunity. It just happened. And so there are individuals who just have those type of intentions. And I knew, like I said, I had to provide for my family. I had to provide for my children. And I always said this, just taking it back one step, and I say this to this day, and if something incenses me about the modern day athlete, it's we were blessed with a talent, right? We were blessed with a talent. Some of us were blessed with the unique ability to be able to use all that talent to experience many things few men and women will ever know. Nothing more, nothing less. That's it. That's all it was. And so I always said, I wanted to be judged life after football. Not that football came easy, because the work that had to go into that, we can talk about that for hours and hours and hours, right? Because that's just not an easy task. But I wanted to be judged as a father, as a husband, and what I did after football. That was stuck right here because I just had seen too many former athletes, former football players who just weren't able to get it going. And that wasn't going to be me. That's that competitive nature. It wasn't going to be me. I was going to do whatever it took, exactly the same way as it took to be the youngest person in the NFL ever to play a game, to start on my high school varsity football team at 13, to start at the University of Pittsburgh, the first freshman in 10 years at 17, and then go on and do what I did in the NFL. I was going to take that same mindset and apply it to the next chapter, whatever it would be. The difficult part was finding out what was that next chapter going to be. That's the real hard portion of it.
You just alluded to something that, you wanted to be recognized as more than an athlete. You didn't want to maybe forever be known just as Marc Spindler, the NFL player. And one of the great quotes that I heard in the past year was actually from a college wrestler. It was after a match. He lost a bout. He hadn't lost a bout in a couple of years. And the commentator in an interview said, geez, you just lost that bout and you don't even really seem bothered by it. He said, well, I want you to know, wrestling doesn't define me. It's just something I do. So how do you crosswalk that to how you think about your NFL career and about how you view being an NFL player now with that in mind, with what that quote is that I just shared?
Well, look, I'm not going to diminish or minimize what I was able to do. So, and at times I have a lot of humility when it comes to it. I don't talk about it. I still appreciate the fans. I don't know, maybe it's the handsome face, whatever it might be, right? The high cheekbones. I don't know. I still have a lot of fans that come up to me and talk to me and recognize me. And it's still humbling. And it's still like a deep down, it makes you feel good. They still remember me. They still remember me, right? So I don't want to diminish or minimize what it took to do that. But moving on to the next chapter in your life and understanding that there probably isn't one without the other. I mean, I'll be honest, right? I mean, if I did not have the family support that I had and a father who really, God rest his soul, who drove me to the brink, to the edge, and then brought me back right at the right time. If I didn't have that in me, instilled in me, I wouldn't be the man or the person that I am today. So there really isn't this version of Marc Spindler without the prior version of Marc Spindler. So they kind of are commingled, right? And I don't know if that was just in my DNA or part of it was in my DNA and it was kind of just developed over a long period of time. It's probably a little bit of both, but once it's in you, it doesn't come out of you. And my competitive nature today is as much or even more so competitive than it was back then. I hate to lose more than I love to win. And I am the poorest loser there ever was. And unfortunately, I'm not a gracious winner either. I'm not. And because I always felt like that I always had something to prove then and something to prove now. That's my why. I do everything that I do today. I always have something to prove. And I think a part of that is from that Scranton area. You're always challenged. even though your favorite son in one sense, the next you have that contingency of people saying you're overrated, wasn't good enough, didn't really do this. And whether that was true or not, it was in my mind then, and it'll stay in my mind to the end of days. You and I are going to play checkers, I'm going to win. You and I are going to play cards, I'm going to win. Whatever we're going to do, I'm in it to win it. I'm not in it to have fun. Taking that kind of mindset to where I am today has allowed me along the way. Like my mother and father were there, my brothers and sisters and family and friends and fans. I still have that same support system today, but now it's with employees, right? Great, great individuals who work. I like to say they work with me, not for me.
Yeah. As you were just talking a little bit there about family, you mentioned your dad, and I think you said something along the lines of your dad pushed you and pushed you and pushed you, kind of beat you down, but built you back up. And I know now from having, read about you and knowing your story a little bit that you actually have a family philosophy, and it goes like this: healthy, hungry, and maybe most importantly, humble. Is that something that you had from your dad? And where are you taking that now in your role as a dad, and maybe even more so, as a business owner?
I get goosebumps when I talk about my dad and the sacrifices that he made to allow me to be the individual that I am today, whether people like that or whether they don't. But healthy, hungry, humble. When I started my family, we've been talking about this for a long time because you got to stay healthy, and that's kind of the grace of God. You got to stay hungry no matter how much success or, how much defeat that you have. And most importantly, like I said, being humble. He who humbles himself shall be exalted, and he who exalts himself shall be humbled. And thankfully, I say this, thankfully, I have been humbled throughout the course of my lifetime on numerous occasions. And the good Lord, if you have faith in that, and I suggest that everyone does, will humble you and he will exalt you depending on how you act and handle situations. So I felt it a duty to raise my children in a way that they are thankful for what they have while they work towards what they want. And staying healthy, hungry, humble is a code that we live by and hope to have them pass that on to their families if they're fortunate enough to do that.
Yeah, that's a great tradition, that started with your dad and that you're following through with your own family. And I know that there's another piece that's not in the quote of healthy, hungry, and humble. Also, I guess you could include the concept of a national championship education. I know that's something else that you've been known to really kind of sponsor and promote. Can you tell us a little bit about that philosophy and what that means to you?
Ironically enough, I had this book of quotes from way back in the day, really good. I think it was a Notre Dame president that said, every time you open your mouth, people will know whether you're educated or not. And although school was not that important to me, it really wasn't. I just had a different mindset, what I wanted to do. I had a plan and I worked that plan. But education to me in a certain way is extremely important. And I wanted my children to be well educated, and thankfully each one of them are. And when my son was one of the top recruited high school football players in America back in like 2020, 19, something like that, I said, look, I want him to have the opportunity and the ability to win a national championship on the field, but also win a national championship in the classroom. And only very few universities, in my opinion, gave them the opportunity to do that, Notre Dame being one of them. And although that was his grandfather's, God rest his soul, my dad's dream for him to go to Notre Dame, I was not a big Notre Dame fan, but I did know it gave him that opportunity to win a national championship in the classroom and give him the national championship on the field. And no, I have not talked about that in a long time. Just last year against the Ohio State Buckeyes, they had an opportunity to win a national championship. We're about 8 minutes away from pulling it off. And with his, graduating 3.5 years from Notre Dame and 3/4 of the way through his master's degree right now, it's almost like that prophecy came true. Win a national championship. It doesn't have to really do with school. It doesn't have to really have to do with football. It's just a mindset on and off the field. You have to have this mindset. And if you have a Super Bowl mentality, right? For me, it's just about mindset. National championship in the classroom, national championship on the field, and that encompasses everything in life, right? I mean, you just got to read through the lines there a little bit.
If you're going to be excellent in every aspect. I guess you can't pick or choose, and I think that's what you're really talking about.
Yes. You got to strive to be your best all the time.
All the time. And one of the things that I watched, Mark, prior to today is Rocco's commitment video to Notre Dame. And I have to tell you, number one, it was beautifully shot. I'm just a bystander, and I was emotional watching it because it was so beautiful. But in it, there's a couple things that I really noted. One is, if we go back to your healthy, hungry, and humble philosophy, boy, did he come across that way in that video, including the humble part. But there was also reference to your dad, his grandfather, and wanting to follow through with grandpa's wish to go to Notre Dame. And it seemed like it was a heavy thing, but in a really positive way. Could you tell our audience a little bit about that, what that meant, maybe beyond what you've already explained a little bit?
Yeah, it's a tough one. My dad, obviously, he was my biggest supporter. Great, tough man, grew up tough in a tough town, right? He said, look, your son has to go to Notre Dame. And he knew I could not stand Notre Dame. I mean, I went to Pitt. I didn't like Notre Dame, and it was going to be a tough sell for me, but it wasn't about me. It was about my son. And so, unfortunately, my dad got sick with cancer. As his time was, starting to wind down a little bit, it started to think more and more and more. And so he would tell Rocco when he was very young, Rocco, you got to go to Notre Dame. Here's the reasons why. And then when I think those two offensive linemen went in the top 10 picks at the one draft recently, he called up. I still have those voicemails that are near and dear to me saying, I'm telling you, got to send the kid to Notre Dame. And so when he was really, really sick and was close to the end, he was in the hospital. I told my son, I said, look, I didn't tell him this. I was like, hey, why don't we just go visit Grandpa? He's in the hospital. He's not feeling well. And I knew when I got there, it was probably going to be the last time I was going to see my dad. I just had this feeling, and it was unfortunate. So, I didn't tell my son that. And so we spent several days with him there in the hospital. And then I'm like, all right, I said goodbye, like for the last time I felt it was. And, my son, said, okay, goodbye, Grandpa. And I walked out of the hospital room first. And then when I turned back and I looked, my son was over the bed and he was whispering in his grandfather's ear. My father, he was like looking at him like this, and I seen him shake his head and he went like this. And I just let it go. I didn't even ask him about it then. And I really, to this day, have never asked him about it now. But he has recently come out and said that he let him know on that day, Grandpa, I'm going to fulfill this commitment. I'm going to go to Notre Dame. And unfortunately, my father passed away and never got to see him, I guess, in person, but spiritually, I know he was there from every step of the way. And so, it's near and dear to my heart that he fulfilled that commitment to his grandfather, got his education there because he felt very strongly about that life after football, and got 4 great years at Notre Dame, 2 of which he started, and had a chance to win a national championship.
Oh, wow.
So it's really a great story.
That's an amazing story. I can sense exactly why, when I asked that question, it would be a hard one to answer because it's pretty impactful. Rocco's not your only kid, and that's a great story. You have other kids as well, and maybe you could talk a little bit about them. And one of the things that I would want to know, we've talked a lot about what the NFL is and how you were raised and your tough mentality, and you're not just a bad loser, you're also not a good winner. Even me having my own children and having been an athlete, it was tough to raise them and not have this expectation without them thinking they could never be good enough. So with all of the mentalities that you've had, and how do you do that as a parent and have them be successful and know that it's okay, maybe once in a while, to fail?
Well, first and foremost, I mean, without my wonderful wife, Rochelle, who is really the matriarch of the family and holds everything together, specifically the athletics, believe it or not. And she was not an athlete by no means, not at all. Without her, it would have been an impossible task. But I was fortunate enough to have a lot of great coaches in my lifetime. But when my daughters started, Gabriella, who was the oldest, and then Isabella, who was the third, Dominique in between, they were highly ranked and highly competitive tennis players. They played all over the country. Ended up going to school on scholarships. I met a coach, his name was Gilberto Rincon. He was their coach. And he told me a lot of things. He said, it's not about you. It's about them. You had your shot. It's about them. And I said I wouldn't put that pressure on them, but I did. But I soon realized that, I was kind of destroying their lives by having this high level of competition, which I can't compromise that. And so we had to have a family meeting where I said, look, it's really simple. If we're going to have this expectation, we're going to have this goal that we're going to be the best, and we're going to train, and we're going to invest money, time, effort, and resources to be the best, then I expect the best all the time. But we can change. We can change that expectation. And by changing the expectation, we don't invest the time, the effort, the resources, the money, and then we just be normal children that play at a normal level. Well, they chose that they wanted to go the one way. It's really to bridge that gap and to be aware of this situation. And if I had a message to parents out there, we are the problem with all youth sports. We got to let them do it for themselves. They can't do it for us. But I was fortunate enough and blessed to have a coach that really helped me through that time. He really helped me through that time. But I got to tell you, because they went through what they went through, no different than what I went through, they're pretty good at what they do today. I mean, Gabriella, right? I mean, talk about a rock star. They're all rock stars. So Gabriella graduates high school, goes to West Point. While she's at West Point, she finishes there. While she's a captain in the Army, she gets her master's from Georgetown in business. She was the assistant to the general twice, and now she's transitioning out of the Army and married to a West Point cadet. Dominique, God love her, gets out of high school, has $4,500 to her name, asked to move to Chicago. She wants to become a full-time model. Beautiful, beautiful young woman. I mean, beautiful, beautiful young woman, inside and out. She is now gone, I don't know how many years. She moved from Chicago. She lives in Manhattan, and she's a full-time model and has been for over 10 years. I've never had to give her a dime of money. But the famous story I told her is, when that $4,500 runs out, you run out. It's over. Well, she's never been home since. I've never sent her a dime. Isabella graduated high school early like Rocco did. She graduated college early. She has 2 master's degrees, and now she helps me run this successful company that we're running. And then Rocco, his story kind of speaks for itself. It's not completely told yet. And hopefully there's just another chapter of that, which he is now, finished 4 years Notre Dame. He got his undergrad in 3.5 years. He's halfway through his master's, 3/4 of the way through his master's, put that on hold, temporary speaking, because he will go back and get that. And went to Nebraska in his last year, had a really good time there. And now he's training for the combine out in Los Angeles as we speak. And on top of all that, my wife she's the rock star of all rock stars. Trust me on this one. I was very fortunate and blessed to meet her when I did. She keeps me grounded on a daily basis, and she challenges me every single day of the last 35 years that we know each other.
And that's why things are as good as they are. That healthy, hungry, and humble mantra isn't just talk. Apparently, it's something that you really live by, and so do your kids. And for your daughter that is the model, I guess, Mark, it's a good thing she got your cheekbones, huh?
Yes, she did. I mean, I'm telling you, we like to say they act like their mom, which is a good thing. And a lot of them get that good looks from their dad. I mean, come on, man. You got to, Greg, look at, but you subtract 40, 50 pounds off of this thing right here. And
oh my gosh, it's a vision, Mark, 100%.
My wife says, you keep telling yourself that, big guy.
Oh, man. Now, listen, as we get into the final part of this interview, here you are, you've went from the NFL, you've had a successful business career, you speak about family in as admirable as a way as anybody could. And I know it's important to you. And maybe to finish this episode, what sort of advice might you want to pass on to people that are out there now? For example, let's start with yourself. If you could give advice to the 22-year-old Marc Spindler, what's one piece of wisdom about self-worth that you would whisper in his ear today?
Dream, believe, achieve. If you're daring enough to dream and you're willing enough to believe, you will always put yourself in a position to achieve. You have to believe in yourself before others will believe in you. And I think self-belief and self-praise are 2 of the biggest things that I can only encourage today's youths to have. Because there's not a lot of people out there, even our parents these days, that are going to believe in your dreams. And I call them dream stealers. And so have a plan and work the plan. And if the plan doesn't work, you got to change the plan, right? But you have to continue to grind it out every single day and have grit. So I would tell, the young Marc Spindler, dream big, believe even bigger, and put yourself in a position to achieve.
I love that. And let's say that someone is facing a major transition like you did in their own career or life, whether, they're retiring or just pivoting. What is the practical first step that you would recommend they take to start building that new identity?
A lot of people do have these dreams, right? A dream without a plan is a wish, and a lot of wishes, unfortunately, do not come true. You need to have goals. You need to be goal-oriented. That's number 1, all right? You have to test yourself every single day. You have to have grit. Grit is the single number 1 characteristic that an individual must possess in order to succeed professionally and personally. It's actually proven. Have a plan and work the plan. The plan has to be clear, concise, compelling, and 100% committed. And if you do that, you will put yourself in a position to achieve. You might not have all the talents in the world. You might not be the biggest. You might not be the fastest. You might not be the strongest. But one thing that you can control, and this is how I lived my life then, I live it now, I will not be outworked. That's something that you control. So if you wake up every single morning with a purpose and have a plan and you work that plan, you're going to probably do well for yourself.
Absolutely. 100% I agree with that. And maybe just to close, the last question. So thinking about the word harmony, here we are with Harmony Talk. What does living a life of harmony, balancing past achievements with future purpose look like for Marc Spindler today?
Well, today I'm blessed with a beautiful, wonderful family, right? Not only personally, but professionally. My harmony is this today. I've been blessed to build a massive company with a lot of great people around to help me do this and, have a lot of individuals who work with me. For me, harmony is this. This is my purpose today, is give individuals an opportunity to change their lives working for me. And when we take, whether it's young students out of college or midlife individuals who are trying to change their life, love single moms because they have to fight for milk every single day. But when I see them, we have a plan in place. And I say, look, if you work this plan and you do what I ask you to do exactly in the manner in which I ask you to do it in, you're going to put yourself in a position to change your lives. And then when I see them change their lives and put themselves in a better position for themselves, put a better position for their family, it brings a smile to my face. And that is my why today. I don't do it just to win, but I have to win. And we're going to be the best at what we do. But I want to see all those around me win and succeed. I just love seeing others change their lives and put themselves in a position to win. That's harmony to me.
That's awesome. And I think that's a great place for us to end. And I think our audience would agree. That's a good version of harmony, Marc, and we appreciate that. So to our audience, thanks for listening to Harmony Talk, where dreamers and doers show us what's possible when grit meets vision. If today's conversation motivated you, sign up for our newsletter at HarmonyTALKPodcast.com and get more stories of courage and reinvention. A big thanks to our sponsor, AM Skyer, for supporting conversations that inspire action, and thank you to Marc Spindler for joining us today. Until next time, I'm Greg Frigoletto. Keep dreaming, keep doing, and own your next chapter.